Thank you. We are aware of that. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. So do we have any remote attendees today? We haven't currently. Okay, thank you. Possibly if somebody does attend remotely, couldn't somebody let me know, please? Somebody might come late. Right. So members of the committee with voting rights can join the meeting remotely, but they're not able to vote on any resolutions of the committee, but can otherwise participate in the debate. We've got a number of officers and other attendees present, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves as we come to the item as needed, please. Have we received any apologies for absence?
No apologies received.
Right, thank you. And substitutes, have we had any named substitutes?
No, we haven't, no.
Okay, thank you. So we do actually have a new member of the committee, and Mr. Willis, would you like to just introduce yourself quickly?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Willis. I'm representing the Diocese Board of Education, from which I sit. And my previous history is that I've spent nearly 40 years in education and quite long as a head teacher. So it's my education knowledge that I work with the DB upon. So very much nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much and welcome to this committee. Right, do we have any declarations of interest from members in respect of items on the agenda? No declarations. So we come to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 22nd of July 2025. I haven't been notified of any proposed corrections for accuracy. Does anybody have any corrections? No? Thank you. Can I please move that the minutes are agreed as a correct record? Yep. Thank you very much. I'll sign those after the meeting. Right, so questions from members of the public. Have we received any written questions from members of the public?
2 questions from members of the public were received. The questions and responses were published as a supplement to the agenda for this meeting on the Herefordshire Council website.
Thank you. Are there any supplementary questions?
Yes, we've received 1 written supplementary question, which I shall read out now.
A questioner can ask 1 supplementary question, and it must be a question, not a statement, and must arise directly out of the original question. And the reply should take no longer than, the original question and the reply, and it should take no longer than a minute to ask. I wish to remind everyone that supplementary questions must not disclose confidential or exempt information, names of individuals, or provide information where they may be easily identified. For example, individual officers of public bodies making criminal accusations or referring to an issue which is currently the subject of a formal council complaint. As set out in paragraph 5.8.26 of the Herefordshire Council Constitution, a written response to accept supplementary questions will normally be provided within 10 clear working days. Sorry, to accepted supplementary questions. Can we have the supplementary question, please?
Supplementary question is from Miss Maggie Steele of Hereford, and it reads, the Nolan Principles are a set of 7 ethical standards for public life, and they apply to everyone in public office. Principle 4 says this: holders of public office are accountable for their decisions and actions to the public and must submit themselves to the scrutiny necessary to ensure this. Is it ethical to reject a complaint because the person whose actions are under scrutiny is a senior officer?
Thank you. So I think I'll answer that now, and I'll just say that as councillors, we accept that the Nolan Principles apply to everybody in public office. Complaints, we believe, are accepted or rejected according to the council's complaints policy and not according to the seniority of the officer relating to the complaint. And I would suggest that if anybody has information otherwise, that they sort of contact us outside of the public meeting to raise any queries about that. Thank you. Right. Do we have any questions from members of the council?
No questions from members of the council were received.
Thank you. Right, so we move on to item 7, which is the Children and Young People's Quality Assurance Briefing. And this is to brief the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee on the development, management and learning from complaints and compliments. So I believe we've got 2 officers delivering this now, and if we can perhaps the Director of Service could introduce them. Thank you.
I will, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I will introduce 2 staff to my left, to my right even, Tilly Page, Head of Service for Complaints, and Susie Sims, who is our Head of Service for, Interim Head of Service for Quality Assurance. Susie and Tilly have got individual papers that reflect their specific service area. But you'll hear as they're talking that both reflect the work that we've done as a council across the 2 directorates to ensure that we're getting the best out of each of these independent processes. And they'll talk you through what we've done to develop and manage the complaints and compliments process. And our focus has been to make sure that we really do understand the experiences of our children and families as users of these processes, how we use the outcomes of these processes, both to either reinforce good practice and good experiences that we've done in terms of our developments, but also obviously to inform our future service development. And so I will hand over to Tilly and Susie and thank them in advance for the papers that they have written. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Chair, did you want me to introduce myself and my role?
Yes, if you could, Tilly, thank you very much. Yeah.
So my name is Tilly Page and I'm the Complaints, Children's Rights and Advocacy Manager for the local authority, and I'm responsible for managing and overseeing the complaints procedure. So I've got the summary points for the Q1 complaints report that was submitted. So the report covers complaints that were processed through the statutory children's complaints and representations procedure in Q1. So that's 1st of April through to the end of June. This quarter, 7 complaints were received, and that's a significant decrease in the number of complaints we received in comparison to last year, where there were 22 complaints accepted and investigated. Of the 7 complaints that were investigated, none were investigated out of statutory timescales. Now, this is, again, a significant improvement to last year, where 79% of the complaints were completed and investigated outside of the statutory timescales. So it's really great to see that improvement. And I know Susie will talk you through the new process that we've worked collaboratively on, but that data speaks for itself. The highest reason for complaints remain around staff attitude and service failure. It's important to note that although complaints are categorised in this area, it doesn't necessarily mean that services have failed. And that leads me on to outcomes of the investigation. So of the 7 complaints we received, 1 was upheld. One was upheld, 2 were not upheld, and 4 were partially upheld. And partially upheld would suggest there are elements of the complaint that were upheld, but elements that were not as well. It's important as well to recognise that given the number of cases open to children's services, only 2 complaints were received around service failure. And again, it's a commendable note that the higher number we received last year compared to this year. Of the 7 complaints we received, 10 were responded to within 2 were responded to within 10 working days and 5 were responded to within 20 working days. So 20 working days is the full statutory timescale that we've got to respond to complaints. And of those 7 complaints that we received in Q1, 2 were escalated to stage 2. There were 7 complaints from previous quarters that were escalated in stage 2, but they're not the 7 that were received in quarter 1. It takes 20 working days, can take 20 working days to complete an investigation. The complainants then got a further 20 working days to come back to us to request that escalation. So those number of escalations aren't necessarily reflective of the complaints we receive in that quarter. There were 31 external compliments received, so from external sources. So that's from members of the public, families, children and young people. And there were 2 complaints submitted to the local government social care ombudsman for review. That doesn't mean they were investigated. We're waiting for the outcome of those, but it means that they were reviewed. So the complaints were looked at and they're under assessment at the moment.
Great, thank you. Did we want to go? You've got a question already, Councillor Highfield. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question to clarify. When you say you answer a complaint within 20 days, I assume that means there's a report. It's not just acknowledged. You've completed a report and submitted that within 20 days.
Absolutely. So just to explain the process very briefly, we have 3 working days to acknowledge a complaint once it's received, and then the 20 working days is the investigation. So there's an investigation conducted where case files are looked at, staff are interviewed as part of the investigation, and a response is formulated, and that is sent to the complainant by the 20th working day. That's the latest day.
Thank you. I assumed that was what it was, but just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we want to go through Susie Sims' presentation now on the and sort of ask the questions sort of around the 2 items together? Is that all right?
I can talk more about the complaints process.
Okay, all right. That would be great. Thank you. If you'd just introduce yourself to us. Thanks.
Yeah, so Suzanne Sims, and I'm the interim head of service for safeguarding and review. So as Tilly alluded to, we have changed the way that we manage our stage 1 complaints. So quality assurance practitioners in the service now undertaking the stage 1 complaints investigation. So we trialled it in November 24, but the policy was revised and strengthened in collaboration with the complaints team in March of this year. So we've got a new process map. So the process ensures that the complaint is allocated to an experienced social worker who is a quality assurance practitioner. They're not directly involved in the case, so that provides a certain level of independency from the team in which the complaint originates. So it kind of allows a fresh set of eyes for the complainants. They're not dealing with the staff that they're making the complaint directly against. So staff who are subject to a complaint are now provided with guidance on the process and the expectations of them within the complaints process. So that might be that they might be interviewed, for example, and what to expect from that really. So if children and young people raise a complaint, they're offered an advocate through the complaints team, but also face-to-face meeting with a quality assurance practitioner. And we also ensure that any written communication that's sent back to that child or young person is age appropriate and understandable for them. They're regularly updated and given the opportunity to have the QA practitioner meet with them to share the outcomes of the complaint as well, just to ensure that they fully understood why we've come to the outcomes that we've come to. All final response letters in the new process are quality assured by myself as service manager of the quality assurance team or the respective service director before being sent out. And that's just to ensure really there has been a thorough investigation and robust rationales included. So making sure that outcomes are appropriate and proportionate and that recommendations that we've made off the back of the complaints are achievable and realistic. Any actions or recommendations arising from the stage 1 outcome are now tracked by the quality assurance team, so by the quality assurance practitioners, to check that they have been completed within the agreed time frame. So following up directly with those teams in the service that those actions have been done. So in terms of learning from the compliments and complaints, we produce a quarterly learning bulletin which celebrates our external compliments and also raises awareness around key areas for learning and improvement from the complaints. So the report highlights good practice and any learning from our complaints to be addressed through training and development. So we have a programme of workshops which mirror the key learning themes from our complaints and from our audits as well. We've got 7 running at the moment on a rolling programme. So an example of some of those, we've got engaging fathers and men, we've got smart planning and safety plans, and we've got conformatory bias as well, as just some examples of workshops. I also have bi-monthly meetings with the Social Work Academy to look at some of the learning from complaints and audits to ensure that our training package really reflects that learning, and that forms part of the training needs analysis in the Academy as well. So just in terms of next steps, I suppose, for us moving forward, so we're ensuring that we're monitoring our compliments. Given there's a high number of compliments, we want to try and understand those better, kind of the categories that they fit into, and what people are finding positive, children and families are finding positive about the way that we're working with them. We will be working with the complaints team to ensure that we track the categories of complaints, so we better understand the quality of our service, so producing quarterly analytical reports that look further at kind of categories of information. And I'm going to continue to produce the quarterly complaints and compliments bulletins for staff, and the workshops obviously following through on the key themes.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anything that you would like to add, Director, at this point before we sort of start the questioning?
No, nothing specific. Obviously, the 2 papers are much fuller in terms of the information that's contained within them, including the flow chart and an example of the learning bulletin that Susie now creates as well for the service. So I'm sure you've read both of those documents as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've got a couple of questions, if that's all right, just to get the ball rolling. And I think one of them, first of all, is about the website. So I can see that on the website, and this was also raised by a member of the public, that the policy, the complaints policy, is the 21-24 complaints policy, and then also that the last annual report is from 2020. So we do need to update the website, and if we can put that as an action, that would be really good, because I assume that you know, we can easily put up the latest annual report. But in terms of the policy, I just wanted to ask, there've been significant changes since we looked at the complaints procedure in July 2024. There've been significant changes and improvements brought about, and I would like to understand, has that changed the policy, and kind of when can we sort of actually see that the policy is up to date, so that the public can be assured that it is up to date?
Absolutely. So just as a reassurance, the policy has been reviewed and is under review. So I know there is a line to say that it may not be up to date. It is under review. It needs to go to CLT. Of course, the Director for Children's Services, it needs Tina's sign off. As we've changed the process, that will be included in the new policy, but it's important to remember that children's statutory complaints are underpinned by the Children's Act and also the Getting the Best from Complaints guidance. So although the policy will be reviewed and amended, it's a statutory piece of guidance that we have to adhere to. So there will be slight amendments, but in terms of the 3-stage process and timescales, that won't change, but it is under review. We're hoping to get it on the agenda as soon as possible, and once it has CLT sign off, it will be put onto the website.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Tina.
Yeah, just to say, I know we've got the annual report for 24-25 because I've seen it and read it in full detail. So I'm not sure why it's not on the website, but Tilly might be able to share with that. But as Tilly says, you know, there is the fundamental legislation that sits behind any policy, and that's not going to change because it is informed by the legislation. What will change in the policy is what you've heard today in terms of that process and the way that we work together and our learning from it. And those were the things that we introduced back at the last one as our intention to do. So it's not that we've changed those things, we've been implementing those things over this last 12 months. And none of those either were suddenly starting at a certain date. It's been a fluid implementation of making sure that we got the QA officers to start with, doing the independent from the team managers, from the case managers, and we started the bulletins, and you know that work has been ongoing since we did that previous scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. And I think certainly that, you know, we did hear about the QA process also in the last meeting, and I think what's really encouraging is the learning that is from complaints that is now feeding into that interaction with the quality assurance. I think is really important.
And very much that's what you'll see in the annual report 24-25. So that's the reflection of the year that we were implementing these changes. As I say, we haven't waited till the end of the year. They've been implemented throughout the year, and you can see the changes in terms of the timescales and the feedback and all of those things as they've developed over the year. This is the first year, 25-26, of full implementation of our new way of working.
Okay, thank you. And there was just one comment from the cabinet member in July 24, who stressed that the most significant issue was being the need to rebuild trust and confidence in the service. And at that time, you said there was still a significant way to go, but it was reassuring to see that certainly certain families had gained confidence in the service to such an extent that they'd stepped forward to become part of the improvement journey. I'm just wondering, Cabinet Member, if you'd like to just comment on that, given sort of what we've heard in the developments over the past year.
Thank you, Chair. The important element in trust and confidence for all of the public is that we want all of the public to have confidence in our service. So if they are concerned about their own child, their own children, or indeed those of other family members, or indeed members of the community, they have the confidence to pick the phone up, make a telephone call, and have a professional conversation, a conversation with a professional. That's the basis of why I say trust and confidence in the service is really, really important. We're here to talk about complaints, but importantly, you'll have heard on many occasions that since the director's arrival and since a more permanent appointment, that three-stage approach to how we assess our performance, and the significant element within that is listening to the experience of children and families, and each month the numbers of families who are prepared to engage in that process increases, and so we get a broader and deeper understanding. The complaints process is necessarily there, of course. It's based in law, it's based in statutory guidance, and it's important that we follow it. It's important that we learn from it, but it's equally important that we learn from the direct experience and that we triangulate that information.
Okay, thank you. And so one of the, I think it's great to see the numbers of complaints dropping. I think when we spoke last year, there was an upward trajectory, and your view at the time, Tilly, was that it was good that people now had the confidence to complain. But it's good to see that the complaints have dropped. I think one of the kind of queries around that, and also great to see the timescales that, that's obviously there's a team working really hard. But I think one of the confusions for some of us is the issue between the statutory complaints and the corporate complaints. And for me is the challenge, the challenge is, does the information that we're provided and the information that feeds into the service and into the QA process, does that include complaints that come through the corporate complaints system, and there are thorny issues there like Section 47 and court proceedings. So that kind of clarity, or is it a case that the complaints have decreased phenomenally because they're sort of all going into the corporate complaints process?
So I will hand over to Tilly to give a little bit of that description around the legislative criteria, but just that reassurance of the annual report covers both statutory children's complaints and the children's corporate complaints, and in both of those you can see the reduction in the number that are coming through. I think I said last time, you know, we look at the number of complaints as one key part of understanding what's happening in our complaints processes. It is really important that we look at the outcome of those as well, in terms of what's upheld and what's not upheld. But it's also important that as we've built our restorative practice, and that's really, really embedding, is that not as many people want to make a complaint, because these things are resolved quicker as we're building better relationships and working with better communication with children and families. So it isn't, I mean, it's pleasing to see the numbers that have reduced, but that's absolutely also reflective of not as many people want to complain, and reflective of when there are issues, and there will be issues and there continue to be, we're resolving them at an informal level. When you start to do the informal, we've got to get the right balance on bureaucracy in terms of recording on children's files that a parent or a child has had an issue that we've been able to talk to them about and resolve, but not having a bureaucratic data system where workers have to then go away and fill in another spreadsheet or fill in another form to evidence that they have done an informal complaint. Does that make sense? Otherwise, we're just adding workload, which is not helpful to frontline workers. So, yeah, you know, the data is one element, and you know, we've built in that restorative practice as well. But the process that we've described to you and the way that we manage them, that is the same process when it starts to work together with the service, whether it's a children's complaint or a children's corporate complaint. It doesn't matter. It still goes to Susie's team. It still goes to an independent person. We still have that meeting with the service user, and all of the learning from those corporate complaints are still incorporated into Susie's learning brief.
Okay, thank you. That does clarify that. Right, Councillor Proctor, you've got a question?
Just picking up on your point about restorative practice should lead to more sort of informal resolution of, so I should have a better relationship with you. I should be able to say, well, actually, this isn't working, and you should be able to say, have the confidence to go, actually, on reflection, to and the data sort of supports that. But it speaks to something else that I've had difficulty putting my finger on why I was uneasy about it. But I think the presenting, as we do in this report, compliments next to complaints doesn't feel exactly right, because complaints are thoroughly investigated, and a lot of process goes in, and the learning that comes out of that is sort of materially different to a compliment, where we don't investigate the compliment, we just sort of accept. And that, what you were describing, that sort of restorative practice bit, feels like that's the sort of complaint side of the compliment that we, and over time we risk, unless we have some, and I accept we don't want sort of new bureaucracies, but unless we have some system for capturing that sort of restorative conversations and sharing that learning, then we're sort of creating a bit of a gap in that. I mean, you're looking at me with furrowed brows, so I may not be explaining this very.
Yeah, sorry about that facial expression. In terms of compliments, first of all, the compliments and the data that we provide with compliments are only external compliments. So they are only children, young people, parents, or external professionals that have felt that they want to write in and say, actually, thank you, or I've received that really good service. They're not our internal compliments where I'm complimenting Susie on what a great report she's written. So, and I think that's really important to know that. We do that internally as a service because it's nice that staff recognise each other when they've been supportive. But I agree that, you know, in order to be clear about what's a compliment, they need to be coming in externally. And we've had many compliments and we haven't showcased them before. So we've not had a balanced picture on what people are unhappy about and what people are happy about. So we've had some very good external compliments from judges in court, for example, down to parents who were saying, you know, you've made my life a different place. You've enabled me to give my children a stable family home, you know, and they're really important to capture. In terms of capturing the restorative conversation, I don't know how we would do that without having to record all of those individual conversations. They're recorded in the children's files and we see them in audit activity. So we do, you know, 20, 30 audits on a monthly basis where we look at the files, and one of the sections that we look at within that audit activity is the voice of the child, the voice of the parent. Is it reflected? Have we spoken to them? And we will see, the auditors will see in that, was there an issue of concern raised? Was it resolved? Those audit activities and the service user feedback, as well as the service user feedback at the end of an intervention that we still offer to all of those families. Those are also feed into Susie's service area, so that all of the audits are overseen. Susie will review all of those, and so we will be able to pick up in those whether we're resolving things. I don't know whether that gives you a bit more reassurance that we are looking at where we are, the evidence of where we are resolving issues. An example that I can give you is we used to have, or we do get complaints, don't we, in terms of communications. You know, my worker's not communicating with me. I need them to communicate with me more. And what we've been able to really drill down to is the cases where absolutely we have not been getting back in touch on a regular enough basis with parents when we need to be working with them. Absolutely, that is a challenge that we have given to our frontline staff and our managers in terms of you do need to communicate with people. But equally, we've also identified the importance of having an understanding between me as the service user and the worker as to what is a reasonable expectation for communication. Because I might complain because you haven't phoned me every day, because I want an update every day. And of course I do, because it's my child you're talking about, but that's not something that we can achieve. So we've talked in our learning about having to, you know, the importance of having that conversation around what is reasonable, what can we agree is a reasonable frequency that we will catch up and we will talk together. So, you know, we do take the, you know, the detail of early concerns and try and resolve those as well. Does that assure a bit more, or?
I think it does, but I also feel like I feel like there's an emerging potential gap that maybe I don't have the solution, but I definitely agree that we don't want social workers to have to go and fill in a spreadsheet every time. But if this trend continues and more of this kind of learning happens in the individual file, then that will create an individual gap. And maybe QAing 30 cases a month will be sufficient to, but I feel it needs some. And I perhaps I should have opened with this, but I think compliments are great. A little while ago, someone sought me out in order to compliment a named social worker. I was very happy, you know, I was really happy to hear it. I was really happy to pass it on. And one other thing that I kind of notice in this is that the compliments we're actually seeing the words of the people who give us compliments, but complaints and these other bits, we're not seeing, certainly in the things that we're seeing, we're not seeing people's actual words. And I think it's always more powerful as a compliment or a complaint or a learning point to see the words that people were using, rather than people complained about this thing and we resolved it in this way. That might just be that that's the information that's presented to us, but
that's not a management of the information that's presented to you. Providing you with the full account of the complaint that's made with permission of the complainant is not a problem at all, but it can just be pages and pages, whereas compliments are very often a quick one-line email. So that's purely the difference. But there is no, you know, the 7 complaints that were made in Q1, there is no reason why we wouldn't share as examples in Q1 all 7. We could ask the people for permission and we could share all 7 in detail with you so that you could see them.
Thank you. I think also what would be, I know Councillor Highfield, you've got a question, but what would be really interesting is to see that, like, those 7 complaints as a percentage of the service users over Q1. I imagine, you know, you've probably got a number at the top of your head of how many service users there were, and, you know, how many the complaints in relation to that. And I understand that for some people it might be very difficult to complain while you're sort of experiencing a service, but maybe you can just keep that in mind, and I'll let Councillor Highfield ask his question.
Well, it's just a suggestion, really. Just as you get a learning experience from complaints, it's a learning opportunity. Some compliments will not be. They're simply, oh, the social worker was so kind and friendly to me. It was really lovely. That's what is expected in every case, of course. So there's not a huge amount to learn, except that they're doing what they're supposed to do. But in some cases, there could be a learning experience with compliments. For example, I was very pleased with the caseworker because he or she did so-and-so. And you then may be able to say, well, that's not part of our standard procedure, but that's good. If we could always do that, it'd be great. So there's a learning opportunity out of that. And I assume you look at the compliments with that in mind, because they may come, I mean, they come up with something you weren't expecting. Yeah, that was a good bit of work. And yeah, maybe we could incorporate that always. So maybe there is some learning to be done from the complaints as well.
There is definitely, and I think that's what Susie and a little bit Tilly were alluding to, in terms of we have a definition of categories under the complaints legislation that we have to put them all in. We're wanting to develop something similar for compliments, so that they don't kind of all get lost in single words, but they get categorised into, this was a communication compliment, or this was a behaviour compliment, or this was a, but you're absolutely right, being able to look at, yes, we expect those things of our workers, but it is also important that we reinforce when people, you know, have fed back. So we're looking to break them down into those groups as well.
And perhaps you might even consider not including in the statistics some compliments where they're simply saying that the worker did what they're supposed to do anyway.
Yeah.
And that really isn't, it's a compliment really ought to be about doing something above and beyond. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, one of the criticisms that that might come at the service is that complaints are shut down for a range of unacceptable reasons, some even before stage 1. That is something that has been suggested to us, and you know, it would be good to have some clarity around that, and also really just what we're doing about issues like staff attitude and service failure. So I know that they're 2 different questions, but there you go.
So in terms of when a complaint is received, it is triaged. So I think, as Susie was saying, we do offer face-to-face meetings. We are very much trying to be restorative with our families, particularly our children and young people. So they are offered the opportunity to have a meeting, either with the operational manager, because as I'm sure you're all aware, the complaints process, particularly the statutory process, is very long. And if we can resolve something for the service user, then that absolutely should be what we are doing. So we offer them a face-to-face meeting. We don't at any point offer them a resolution meeting to avoid them going through the complaints procedure. They are given the option of having that resolution. And as Susie said, if a complaint is accepted, they're then offered the opportunity to meet with the quality assurance officer, who would be the investigating officer, supported by a complaints officer, so we can really hear what their experience is, rather than just taking the email or the letter or the phone call. They're offered that opportunity to meet with us. I think in terms of sort of working with our families and explaining whether a complaint is accepted or not, every decision that is made around which policy will be applied to the complaint is explained to the complainant. And there's collaborative work with myself and Susie about we look at the complaint in depth, because there will be elements that cross both processes. Good practice from the Ombudsman suggests that if it's a statutory complaint, so about a child in care, for example, but there are elements where they're talking about court proceedings that would fall under the corporate procedure, we would put that through the statutory process. So I note your earlier comment of, are the statutory numbers lower because we're putting more through corporate? No, as Tina rightly said, there's a decrease across both policies. So there's collaborative work between myself and Susie. We do look at the complaint in detail. The decision that we make is explained to the complainant, and complaints are only rejected in line with what would be exempt within the statutory guidance. So anything out of a 12-month timescale, for example, ordinarily isn't accepted. Now, there are exceptions to that, in that if there are officers still here that could respond to the complaint, there are social workers that worked on the case, say 18 months ago, for example, and the quality assurance officers can look at the case files and can interview that social worker, then we would accept it. If we think that we can do a fair and thorough investigation, then we absolutely would. And we also look at who the complainant is. The statutory guidance is very clear about who can and cannot complain. And if it's a grandparent, for example, we need consent from either the child and young person or from the person with PR. So again, that's part of that triaging and that collaborative work to make sure that the complaint can be accepted, and we do everything we can to work with our families to make sure that the complaint can be accepted. And that can be in terms of, as I say, working with the child and young person so they know about the complaint and obtaining their consent for the complaint to be made on their behalf, and that open communication with them about which policy will be applied and explaining why. And that's not just in an email back and forth, as Susie and Tina have both explained. That's in having a meeting, and whether that's over the phone or face to face, we explain that to them. So complaints aren't just rejected because of perhaps who an officer is or what the complaint entails, and any decision is based on the guidance and is explained to the complainant.
But thank you. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of a kind of trauma informed approach, is that, you know, is that a general approach that's taken to complaints, given that there may be situations where, you know, there is a lot of trauma? And I know that the service is now working in a restorative way, which is having a big impact, but this trauma informed approach, does that apply to complaints as well?
Absolutely. And I think something we've all worked on collaboratively for the last few years is building relationships with children's services as well. So if there's any safeguarding elements to the complaint, for example, we contact the front door, we contact MASH, we contact the social workers. So there is a lot of work done with a complaint before it is just accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, sorry to go on. Let me make it clear. I'm extremely impressed with the progress you've made on this. It's very, very good. I just wanted to talk about something about informal resolution. We've done some work with the standards panel on which is complaints about councillors, but the process, as with your process, is long and expensive to do it fully informally. And an informal resolution is not only saves everybody a lot of time and money, but it's often actually better for the complainant because they get to speak to somebody senior quite quickly and sound off, and they know that somebody's paying attention to it, and that often makes them extremely happy. Whereas if they have to wait for 20 days and then there might be a follow-up, and so I'd recommend that you take informal resolution as far as you legally can, because my experience of this, which is extensive in another organisation, where I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of informal complaints, in most cases, the complainant was happier because they got to speak to somebody relatively senior, relatively quickly, and say their piece and know that it was into the system. So I'd recommend that you take this as far as you can.
I would echo that and completely agree. And we have had some really positive feedback from our families that when we've had those resolution meetings and those conversations, as you say, with a senior operational manager, is that they felt heard, and that's what they wanted. Of course, something has happened for them to get to the point where they feel like they need to make a complaint, but what they really wanted was to be understood and heard. And that's what we've seen really with these resolution meetings, is that sitting with somebody and taking an hour out of your day to really understand what's happened and the lived experience of this, the young people, of the families, and hearing them and taking actions. And sometimes, as Tina said about our communication, sometimes just taking the time to explain why we're involved, why we've made certain decisions.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It can be a misunderstanding, and where we've had complaints about poor communication, where we've implemented these face-to-face meetings and these phone calls and that initial contact with the complainant, they're being heard, they're being understood, and they're understanding why we're involved and why we've got to do some of the things we've got to do. So yeah, I completely agree.
Councillor Hitchner.
Great, thanks very much. It's good to see it all going the right direction. So I sort of start off with that that caveat, and obviously the better it gets, the harder it is to ask questions. But we're looking at continual improvement. So take that context. First of all, on page 3, we're a little bit confused because it says complaints processed through the corporate complaints policy are reported separately, and that causes a lot of confusion because it suggests that you don't. You made it clear to us that this covers children's corporate complaints as well. So I just think that maybe that wording is just a bit strange.
Yeah,
it
was just, I think they were just making the point that there is a different set of data for what is corporate and what is statutory, but we bring the learning together.
I'm just assuming that all the data is all together. So good. Okay. There's a kind of general question. How can we be assured that people, by complaining, they don't feel they're troublemakers? So they're reserved about coming forward. How do we know? Tilly, you've been in your role some time, so maybe you've noticed a change in the psyche of people. But I'd just be interested in it. It's very difficult to evaluate that, but you may be the one who's best placed to know whether things have actually changed. But just another question really is on the same sort of lines. The area of where there are the most complaints is assessments, and it's only gone from sort of 0 to 5. And I did see some information which I was reading, I think today, and that suggested that in the assessment area, people are more aware now of how to make complaints. So I don't know, the figures have gone up from, they've gone up 10%. So people are more aware. So are they now, is that the reason for this increase in 5? Or there's some other reason? And again, it's just that, I feel I ought to be asking some sort of question. And it just struck me, the other report saying that people know more about it. So therefore they're questioning more. So Tina, it sounds as if you've got the answer already.
No, but I've got a response. In terms of the assessments, a little bit, as Councillor Fagan was saying earlier, I think it is important that we do contextualise that in data, because the assessment teams will deal with 4 times as many cases than any of the other service areas within the same time frame, because they are the receivers of the new referrals coming in and will deal with the assessments. So they will have 800 cases open in a short space of time in comparison to 600 open in a different service area for a longer space of time. So I think that's kind of important for us to explain. But the other part that you were saying around how do we know when I've lost my train of thought, but how do we know when there's been an increase and that people are confident enough to complain? And you kind of answered the issue I was going to say, really, and that is that we make it normal business. We make it acceptable, normal business. But we have to do that with the balance of trying to make sure that we reinforce the informal options that we want as well. So we make sure that every time we have written to somebody, we've made sure that we let them know, if you want to make a complaint while you're open to our service, this is how you do it. But we follow that, and so we've made sure that we've given them the code and we've given them the address, and it's been put on letters and it's been put on emails. But of course we do that also within the context of saying, but that's not to say that you have to complain if you're unhappy. If you are unhappy, come and talk to us, and we will want to try and resolve that as quickly as we can. But that's been important for us to do as a service as well, as senior managers, reinforcing to our staff that people making complaints isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's not something that we want. We want to resolve things early, but there will be things where people are unhappy in our lives, and people sometimes want to do the formal process in order to get that on record. And so it's a combination of all of these things, making sure that our staff know how important it is, that they're not closing people down or fearful of people making complaints. It's normal business. It's certainly normal business in children's services. People will make complaints. So let's ensure that they know how, and then we will deal with those within due process. But while we're doing that, let's talk to them as well about how we can resolve these things in a fair way. And I will just take the opportunity to say that I know that the independent scrutineer of the Safeguarding Board also looked into our complaints processes as well on behalf of some families that he'd met, and he's written back, and I've had a copy of that letter, and it says, I've also reviewed the process for the way Children's Services handles complaints, and I have viewed one of the regular weekly updates that are considered by the Children's Social Care Leadership Team. Based on this evidence, I would conclude that Herefordshire County Council is now operating at the same standard as other local authorities in terms of complaints about children's services. Now, before anybody says, that's not about us wanting to be the same as everybody. We want to be better, and we want to be doing it really, really well. Of course we do. But we are a children's service, and people, a lot of people that come into our services don't want to be involved in our services. And so we need to get that right balance between recognising that complaints have a role to play. We need to do them formally. We need to do them formally because some people want that formal process and they need an outcome. And we as a service need an outcome and an end. So it's not always possible to do the informal resolution, because you are never going to get to the point where potentially you get what the person wants as an outcome. If they want as an outcome that we close the case and don't have their child on a child protection plan, that may not be an outcome that we can achieve for them. So you can't do that through the informal process. You need to go through the formal process so that they can get to that outcome, because that outcome will say it's either agreed or it's not agreed, or it's upheld or not upheld. And then they can move into stage 2 and stage 3 and LGO. And that's what those processes are kind of built there for.
So we had Councillor Davis and then Councillor Cornthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to congratulate you on the reduced numbers. That's really good. The question I have is, are the reduced numbers down to a more rigorous application of the criteria for accepting complaints? And has that, do we have that kind of vision of the number of complaints are the same, or they have actually come down? I should imagine as improved staff performance will potentially reduce complaints anyhow by the nature of the beast. But I was just wanted to make sure that we actually understand what complaints have come in, what doesn't meet criteria, what does meet criteria, and are we improving that way?
I will start, because I'm going to hand over to Tilly, who can give you, she may have some data, but she'll certainly have her independent anecdotal awareness of what that is. But as we're talking, I'm writing down things that I think, actually listening to your questions and clarifications, there are things that we could do even better to give you that assurance, and would be valued to me. And one of those things I've written down is, in our future quarterly reports, having the data on the number of complaints that have been made which have not been accepted, and also then an overview of how they build into what were the reasons for them not being accepted, so that we can understand that and communicate that back to our staff and also to our parents as well. So that was one of the things that I wrote down. I wrote down some other ones as well. But Tilly might be able to give you a little bit more.
Absolutely. So I did check this in quarter 1 of being slightly preemptive. So for reassurance, no complaints were rejected in quarter 1 in terms of statutory complaints. But there was one which was, I think, as Tina alluded to earlier, we sometimes get pages and pages of complaints. So one particular complaint, there were elements that were rejected because they were out of timescale and we weren't able to produce a fair and thorough investigation. Susie had a conversation with the complainant and we reiterated that message and why we couldn't investigate those specific aspects. But the complaint itself was accepted, but there were elements. But we wouldn't have been able to produce a finding, and that's not fair for that service user for us to accept a complaint that we wouldn't be able to draw a conclusion on because it would have been no finding, wouldn't it? So so there weren't any rejected. I think Tina's suggestion is absolutely right in terms of data. We can put in there how many were submitted but not accepted, and reasons why for that, you know, if they are out of timescale, for example, and that we've communicated that back to the complainant.
Thank you. Councillor Cornthwaite, you had a question?
Yes, it was from a slightly different angle, really. I was thinking about the people that might be being complained about. Do we look after all our staff in these situations so that they're not left out on a limb? Just confirm that each level of staff is also taken care of throughout the complaints procedures.
I think that's also a very good point. And it is really important to us, which is why I was saying, you know, half of that is about making sure that our staff we do showcase the compliments as well, because we didn't used to have that. We only had the complaints. And so we had a lot of learning on complaints. We also do make sure that their managers know about the complaints, but building it as business as usual, if I can use that phrase, without minimising it. But that too is important for our staff in terms of our culture. It's okay that people want to come make complaints. We need to understand what they are. We need to take them seriously. But the starting point isn't always that you as the member of staff are the one at fault. And trying to communicate that and make sure that our staff feel confident that they are going to make sure that they can have a fair investigation. And one of the learnings, for example, we talked to the staff about just recently was one of the things that we've been able to do better is where we uphold or don't uphold is to make sure that staff are recording in the case files what they've done, what they've said, have they sent the letter, have they sent an assessment, and these are little bits of elements of complaints. I've never received a letter or I've never received a report with staff feeling like, but I have sent it, and we're able to say we can see that you have, and talking to them too as part of the investigation about why they did that particular activity or why they might have found it difficult working with that particular case. And so always unpicking that as well, so that as learning from the complaint, as you say, we might learn that actually, for example, we may have a particular difficult case where a parent is particularly unhappy, and we have to get that balance between making sure that that worker who has built a relationship with the child maintains that case, but also asking ourselves the question, is the time right that this case needs a different social worker? Because whilst on the negative side, that child has got to build a new relationship with a new social worker. On the positives, in order to get the best outcomes for the child, you need to be able to work with the parent. And if the parent absolutely is not going to, that relationship with the worker is completely broken down, sometimes it is the right decision to have a new worker. And that might be in terms of staff welfare as well. So we always look at the combination of those things when we're looking into it.
I just wanted to add some further reassurance, just to echo what Tina said. As part of the stage 1 process, the quality assurance officers do speak to the managers as well, so that they can support their staff. But it's important to note that also at the independent stage, so at stage 2, the investigating officers, when they are interviewing staff, they do remind them that it's not them as professionals being investigated, it's the local authority. So there is that further reassurance to them that as Tina says, it's about process, it's about policy, it's about our statutory duty to be involved, not that individual worker being investigated. It's a local authority investigation.
But just to add, but we also do look at patterns and trends. So we do look at the staff that have had more complaints made against them than other staff, for example. We look at those things because that's just as important that we take that into account in terms of looking at that person's practice and how they are able to build relationships with the parents that they're working with.
Thank you. Coming back to the point which I did raise earlier, just about the evidence from the Q1 complaints about staff attitude and service failure, and what that says about how we're interacting with families. And I'm just wondering what that's obviously been flagged up. So what is being done about that? I realise the numbers are very small, but they're there on the graph. So what approach is being taken to tackle that issue, those issues?
Well, Susie might want to add in terms of how we identify any patterns or trends in terms of behaviours that people find difficult, but generally it is about the person. And so, as I say, we would look at that particular case, that particular relationship with that child or that parent. Over here, we're checking whether or not that is a particular worker that's had a number of complaints made against them. But generally, Susie in her workshops will feed back to staff what it is that parents have found particularly difficult. I can give an example of a complaint. A common complaint, for example, is that parents will say, I don't understand what's happening. I just don't understand what's happening. And our staff will say, but I've explained it. I have told them, I've explained what's happening. And I explained that we've had a strategy discussion. We're now going to do a child protection investigation. I've explained that we were going to conference. I explained it. I told them, and it's in writing. And the parents made a complaint because they didn't understand it and they don't feel that they've had that shared. So looking at how we might help that, because none of those are wrong. Those two people are not wrong. The worker has explained it, but we understand that this is day-to-day life for us as professionals. The family are not wrong. They haven't understood it. They've probably been told that or, received that in a phone call at a time when they're most anxious. So one of the things that, in fact, we've just commissioned today, because I've been working on it over the last couple of months, is to get not videos, but some animation, information videos done in animation around the child protection process. What does it mean if somebody's come to say to you, we are now going to open a Section 47 child protection investigation? So as well as having the worker explain it, as well as having it in writing, our parents will be able to, and our children and people will be able to log on to a little video that takes them through that process as well. So always trying to just identify things that we can do better to make the experience a little bit better.
And just to add to that, in terms of the kind of issues raised around staff attitude and behaviour, it's about creating that environment. So raising it with the team manager and allowing then that reflection around, what's happened in that particular case, so that they have learning through their own professional development, and just, allowing the right environment for those reflections, really, in terms of what's happened through the complaints process. So that also takes place.
Okay, thank you. Unless anybody else has got a question at the moment. Councillor Hitchener, did you have a question?
I was just going to say that briefing would be very helpful for councillors, I think. Something pictorial, we like that. We like that sort of thing, something basic and simple. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Proctor.
And just following that through, I think certainly whenever we delve into complaints, find, and I can tolerate a high degree of reading policy documents, but sort of going through two sets of different complaints policy documents in order to understand what's going on, I did find myself thinking, is this what we expect families to understand? So do we have a more accessible, this is how the complaints process works, that we share with?
Absolutely, we do. I echo what you say. It's a very detailed, long document, as are our policies. The corporate policy, which has just been reviewed for complaints, is a long document. There is a summary document as well, as there will be with the children's policy. In terms of our communication with complainants, there is a shorter summary document explaining to them the three-stage process, what the local authority's involvement will be. So at stage 1, that's our involvement, and then at stage 2, that it's an independent investigation, but the local authority will be interviewed as part of the investigation. So it's a one-page document which is shared with complainants when they make a complaint, so they understand the process. And again, as part of that meeting, that initial meeting with them, we do explain to them again what the process is and give them that opportunity for questions, because I do understand and appreciate it is a lengthy process.
It's a very small thing, but I'm slightly allergic to let's stick everything on the website, but we do have quite a lot of information about complaints in the contact us, and we don't have that document.
It's a project that's part of the digital transformation. I think I've got that right. But the complaints website the web page is being changed. So the policies will be on there, the summary documents, a printable leaflet will be on there. So it's part of one of the projects that website will be reviewed, because we're aware that it's a very wordy web page, and although everything is on there, it's not the easiest to find. So it's something we're working on. It's something we're very aware of.
Yeah, Councillor Hayfield.
Just a very quick comment, and I'm sure Councillor Powell will agree with me on this one. In police work, there are two categories of police officers who get the most complaints. They're the ones who don't do their job very well, and they're the ones who do their job very well. The ones in between don't get complaints. Is that right?
Thank you. Right. Again, I'm going back to the meeting of July 24, and one of the recommendations there was that it said Scrutiny recognises the work taken in partnership with the Leeds City Council around complaints, and asks that consideration be given to having an independent professional investigate and document the complaint and desired outcome. And I think that is one of the points that was accepted. Well, when it's just getting my head around independent. So as I understand it, there is a social worker who is not involved in that case that looks at the complaint. Is that what you mean by independent? Okay.
We mean independent of the case. So it's not the worker and it's not the manager, it's somebody independent of the case. Okay,
all right, thank you. Because some of the sort of concerns that have been raised are sort of that one of them was that the complaint system is not independent of legal services. So there's that point, and then there's also just the matter of some of the independent person. So we've got an independent social worker, independent of the case. At times there may need to be an independent person. So the sort of how is that independent person sort of chosen? Sort of where do they come from? And I have another question just relating to this, but it looks like you've got an answer on that so far, Tilly. Yep.
So in terms of stage 1, that's local resolutions. That's the local authority's response. So as Tina rightly said, the investigating officer is independent of the case, but they are a very experienced social workers. That's Susie's team, it's the quality assurance team. In terms of independent, I think you mean independent investigating officers at stage 2, possibly. And they also an independent person. There's 2 people that are commissioned. They are independent people from different parts of the country. They are recommended to us by other local authorities for work that they have done. We obtain references from other local authorities about the work that they have done. But we also, what's really key is we listen to the feedback of officers, but also complainants. So the independent person is commissioned by us at stage 2 to conduct the investigation. If at any point the complainant feels like that person is not independent or they've been compromised or they're biased, we hear that and we can change the investigating officer. And it's the same with officers as well. If they feel like they're being biased against the local authority, for example, then we wouldn't use that person. So there is scrutiny over those independent people, because what we don't want is bias either way. It needs to be a very fair, very independent, thorough investigation.
Okay, thank you. And is it standard practice that a complaints team would sit within legal services? Is that normal?
The complaints team does not sit in legal services. Just want to make that clear. So it sits in Governance and Law Directorate, but it does not sit with legal services. It's an independent team within that directorate.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So if, for example, somebody wanted to make a complaint about somebody high up in the council, that are there barriers to that, or is it a fairly standard process?
It's a fairly standard process in terms of the corporate complaints procedure is very clear that it would be the operational manager generally that would respond to the complaint. Obviously, there will be levels, particularly the higher up you get in the council, where there wouldn't be somebody that would be able to conduct a fair and thorough investigation. And at that point, we would direct somebody to the ombudsman. So the local government ombudsman can conduct an independent investigation. So, for example, if someone was to complain about our chief executive, I would suggest that they contact the ombudsman, because there wouldn't be somebody here that could conduct an investigation into that complaint. So we wouldn't reject that complaint. We're offering them an alternative route. We would signpost them to the ombudsman. So I just want to reassure that we wouldn't reject a complaint based on somebody's level in the authority, but it may be that we direct them to the ombudsman so that they can have an independent investigation.
I think it's also just important to clarify the difference between an allegation that's been made against a professional and a complaint that's being made against a professional. So if a complaint is made against a senior manager, you would always look to the next ranking senior manager to investigate that at stage one. If it's an allegation of misconduct, then that's a very different approach in terms of how that would be investigated. So whistleblowing, there's obviously an independent process in terms of managing that. Allegations against staff in terms of risk to children and professional conduct and behaviour that's a risk to children, there's a different process in terms of investigating that. So we're just talking about complaints.
Okay.
Can I just?
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Proctor.
Just following up through, does the Ombudsman expect those just just explain, because I'm slightly surprised. I'm sure you're right, but it's all new to me. So
Absolutely. So we have a link with the Ombudsman who we can seek advice from. Obviously, we anonymise any advice that we're going to the Ombudsman about. But it is absolutely the expectation that if we can't conduct an internal investigation, that we would signpost the Ombudsman. And the other expectation is that at every single point of the complaints procedure that we signpost to the Ombudsman, if the complainant feels like we are not handling their complaint correctly, that they have the Ombudsman details and they can contact them. But that's the expected good practice of authorities. If we can't conduct an investigation, we shouldn't attempt to mark our own homework in that way, if we can't do a fair investigation.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I also have another question just about representatives. So I imagine that some people who wish to make a complaint find that difficult to do themselves, and they may wish to choose a representative to help them make that complaint, somebody who the family trusts, able to represent them in difficult situations. That potentially could create tensions. I mean, how is a representative deemed suitable?
I think I slightly touched on it earlier when we were talking about who can and can't make complaints. So, as I said, the policy and the statutory guidance is very clear about who can make complaints. Families do often opt to have a representative in the form of sometimes a family member or an advocate, but ultimately that representative without consent is not entitled to any information. So for us to complete a complaint investigation, we wouldn't then be able to share that information. So it's not always for us to determine who is suitable, but we need to ensure that that representative is acting in the best interest of the complainant. We make contact with the complainant to confirm that they are happy or that they've asked that representative to complain on their behalf. And that goes for children and young people as well. Very, very poignantly there, that complaints about children and young people, we need to make sure that the young person is happy that that complaint is being made. And also give them the option, as it is their right, to make the complaint themselves with, as Susie said earlier, the support of an advocate or the support of a parent or a family member or somebody, another professional involved. So hopefully that answers that. But we make direct contact with the people involved to make sure that they've consented. What we don't want is somebody to make a third party complaint without the family's knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors wanting to ask a question? Because I have another one. I mean, it does also come from our lines of inquiry meeting, etc. But just obviously, children's social care. There's a lot of there can be a lot of difficulty. As you said before, nobody really wants to be involved in social care, and I think what. Sorry, child protection. Okay, child protection. So there was one of the questions that was raised earlier was about the new inquiry into the human rights of children in the social care system in England, and the parliamentary inquiry, which is looking at children in care. So but also wider aspects of the system would be relevant. For example, kinship care, availability of additional support to families with disabled children, or the efficacy of early intervention measures. So this is obviously the human rights of children and their families is obviously a national issue that is coming up for inquiry. And I just wonder how sort of human rights influences our execution of children's social care in Herefordshire. Is it something that we're constantly aware of, or and that sort of as is being quoted, the sort of right to a family life is sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes there could be a tension between that and child protection.
I don't think there is a tension, to be honest, and I think that we work to the principles of the Children Act, that legislation, the Children Act 1989. That legislation starts with the paramount rights of a child. The child's rights being paramount, their right to a family life, their right to being protected. And within our education, within children's services, we obviously work to the child's right to have education. So I don't think there's a clash with those things at all. In terms of our policies and our procedures, they would underpin those things. But in terms of the way that we work with children and young people, it is always to make sure that we have heard their views, but that also we make decisions that we believe are in their best interests, and we do that taking into account the views of their parents and all of those relevant professionals that are working with them. You gave the example of the right to family life. We, as you know, we work particularly hard to make sure that we, in our care prevention, to keep children at home as much as wherever it's safe to do so, enabling those parents to care well for their own children. That's our starting principle. If children do need to come into the care system, we absolutely, our first and foremost place to go is there any connected person to that child and family? Historically in children's services, I think that was experienced as children's services just not, or being challenged as just not wanting to find a placement for a child. And I've spent many meetings reinforcing that that's not the case. We are underpinning, or we are applying our legal duty to see whether or not there is somebody within that child's connected network that can be a foster carer for that child. And if there isn't anybody, we then go and look for a foster family. That's taking you through the process of a child's right to a family life. So that's just one example of in terms of what we do. So I don't think they do challenge, and obviously anything that comes out of the inquiry we will take into account, but I don't think that it challenges anything in the way that we work.
Right, thank you. Councillors, do you have any other questions? I think it's been a really helpful session. I think as we said, everybody feels sort of lightened by reading the report and seeing the numbers and seeing the work that's gone into it, hearing how the kind of quality assurance works alongside, seeing the training sessions that are offered. I think within the training sessions there are all sorts of topics that we might, as a scrutiny committee, like to consider, and I assume that that training, I think that's what I read, it has come out of the sort of feedback on complaints and compliments. So, but I think that's it now. Thank you very much for the presentations and thank you for your honesty. I know that there are we've heard from your side and from the service side. What I had wanted to do previously was potentially have some witnesses here, so that our session included witnesses, and then it was felt that it might be better for us as a scrutiny committee to take that out of a sort of public scrutiny meeting and just get some feedback that we can look at and potentially make some recommendations that come out of that. So that is something that as a committee we will be doing. In terms of recommendations, I haven't actually managed to keep an eye on the discussion. But are there any recommendations, councillors, that are coming out of this? I know that there was action to make sure that the website was updated.
Look for learning opportunities in compliments as well as complaints.
Okay, recommend to look for learning opportunities in compliments as well as complaints. Right. I'll just go to the scrutiny officer. Have we had any other recommendations come in on this discussion?
Yes, we have, Chair. Would you like to put it on the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, one moment. I'll read that out, Chair, for the purposes of those watching. The Herefordshire Council ensures that it lists the complaints received that were not accepted and the reasons for the rejection in quarterly performance monitoring and its annual report of complaints.
Thank you. And Councillor Highfield's point about ensuring that there is learning from compliments as
for learning opportunities from compliments.
Okay.
Yep.
Just
you happy to type that in as we speak.
I have one question about that. So it seems like a good thing, but in terms of a recommendation that we would track, it does it. So we can sit here in this meeting and say we think you should do that, and that seems fine. But in terms of making a formal recommendation that we can then come back to in a year's time and say, have you done it? It doesn't feel like it's got enough meat behind it. It's not really a target to meet. It's just a thing that we probably all think they should do. But unless it's kind of, by this date do this thing, it's going to be very hard to evidence that.
Yes, the director.
I had one other as well that I thought was a really good suggestion, and so I'd make a suggestion that actually the recommendation is that our future quarterly and annual reports include the following, and one is the learning from compliments, one is the meetings that are complaints that are declined and some rationale for that. And the other one is that where we do case file audits, we specifically look for evidence of that restorative practice early resolution. And those three for me would be the recommendation could be in your future quarterly and annual reports, you look at these particular 3 dimensions.
And that would cover all the points we've raised. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Did you manage to capture that?
I've started to do it. It's a little complex. I just got a question how that also relates to the first recommendation around complaints received that were not accepted. Are we looking to bundle the whole lot into the single?
I think that's what she's suggesting. Yeah.
Okay, marvelous. So, okay.
Just clarify, Tina, are you calling it early resolution or informal resolution? I think there's a difference.
I'm going to put this back on the board. It will need some work if that's okay with you, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Take time, no pressure.
There we go.
Thanks, David.
Not meeting, it's playing.
Right.
Apologies.
Evidence in case file audits of informal resolution. And your first line, you just need to the that it lists. Herefordshire Council feels that in quarterly drink and its annual report, it includes
Does that capture the restorative, just the evidence of restorative working? That captures that. Okay. All right. Is everybody happy with that, with those recommendations?
It's okay with you, I'll read it out.
Yes. All right. If you could read it out, thank you. We put that as an action, and if we could please be notified when that is done, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so the committee is making a single recommendation, which I will read out, and it's now on the screen. That Herefordshire Council ensures that in quarterly performance monitoring and its annual report of complaints, it includes learning from compliments, complaints that are declined and the reasons for this, and evidence and case file audits of informal resolutions.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody, can we agree on those, please? Yep, that's an agreement. Thank you. So, thank you. I suggest that we have a very short 10-minute break before we come to item number 8 with it, which is youth justice. If that's all right, we can start at 20 to 4. Yep, so can we make sure that, sorry. Do you want me to pull up the exempt? Yeah. All right. So before we stop the live stream, if I can just say that the youth justice item, Appendix 2 of the report is exempt, and if information within Appendix 2 is to be discussed, can we please take a vote to move into closed session? So Appendix 2 is do councillors want to include that in the discussion? And if so, we need to take a vote on moving into closed session.
Are we able to provide the reason for that, Tony?
I can provide the reason for that. And the reason is that there is information within Appendix 2 that is likely to reveal the identity of an individual. So that's why we've requested to go into exemption.
So I propose we go into exemption and
Right, so can we just take a vote on that then? Everybody for exemption? Okay, thank you very much. So under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Schedule 12A of the Act, and it is considered that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information, and the reason for the exemption is information which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual. So we've voted on that recommendation. We've confirmed that we wanted to go into the private section. So I want to thank you. And this part of the meeting can now be undertaken in private session. Can I confirm that the live stream has stopped? And please can members of the public now leave the meeting? Thank you. Sorry, apologies. Did you say? We're recording. We're recording. Okay. All right. So thank you for the discussion on youth justice, which was exempt due to the details that might reveal identity of individual. So we've come up with a recommendation, which if we could please ask Scrutiny Officer to read.
Thank you, Chair. There's a single recommendation that Herefordshire Council engage with colleges regarding education and training for those in the youth justice system.
Right, thank you. Councillors, will you vote on that, please? Yep, thank you. So that's agreed as a recommendation. Thank you. Are there still any members of the public that need to be invited back into the meeting? As we are back in the open session.
We'll check that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, not that there's a lot left in the meeting, but so the next item is the work programme. So I don't think, to be honest, that there's a lot that we can say about the work programme. We, apart from the fact that we're due to meet to look at the work programme again. I'm just actually trying to find the work programme on the agenda. Does anybody have any comments? I think I'll refer back to the Scrutiny Officer just on the work programme and where we are with the work programme, and also the sort of in terms of the work that we've done with co-optees. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You have a work programme in front of you for your formal committee meetings ahead. What's not contained here at the moment is a work programme for your agreed task and finish group looking at early help. I've met with officers a couple of times to start that work, and I'm meeting with them again next Tuesday with regards to the roadshow aspects of that task and finish group and preparing for those. You've asked about co-opted members. This committee, like every other committee, Scrutiny Committee of the Council, has the ability to recruit up to 2 co-opted members should it wish to. We don't recruit to those as a matter of course. We do that on your say-so, and that usually follows an identified need for somebody to bolster the committee's sort of ability to scrutinise. In addition to this, you have to also recruit 5 statutory co-opted members. That's those as defined by the Constitution and within the statutes of the Local Government Act 2000. 2 of those co-opted members are delegates from the Diocese of Hereford and the Archdiocese of Cardiff. I've got the Diocese and Archdiocese of Hereford. Well done. Obviously we have David Willis here, who's a representative from the Diocese of Hereford. We have contacted the Archdiocese of Cardiff to remind them that they have a seat at the committee should they wish to, and I'm sure I'll hear back from them in due course. We've also put a request in through through the school governors' messaging systems with the newsletter, they're placing an advertisement asking for expressions of interest for the 3 statutory parent governor reps to this committee, a representative from primary school, a representative from secondary school, and a representative from special schools. And we will process those as and when we receive them.
Right, thank you. And if we can also just put on the record our appreciation to Jan Francis and Stuart Lever, as they were co-optees on this committee over a 2-year period, which has now come to an end. Right, so in terms of the work programme, yes, Councillor Highfield?
Yeah, on this, the work programme for November, we've got pursue, prevent, protect, prepare and objectives to be agreed. One of the things that has concerned me in the prevention programme is occasionally money becomes available for various programmes that help prevent problems with young people. And so far, that money has always been too slow arriving. I've raised this before in other committees. I've raised it, I think, in audit and governance about the funding of these items. To give an example, last year there was some money available for youth clubs to have an extra worker during the summer holidays. And the money was paid on the 1st of November, which was frankly disgraceful because it was approved in the April. So what I'd like to do is have that, some aspect of that in the programme when we look at prevention, so that we can question the procedures by which money is made available, not whether it's made available, but how it's actually funded, how it's paid out. Is that possible?
Thank you, Councillor Highfield. I understand what you're saying, but I think that agenda item is about the prevent programme. It's what
but some of it's funded, you know.
Okay. Well. Do you want to come in, Tina?
You're right. It's just the word that's the same. It's not about. It is specific to the 4 Ps. Is the police and the local authority action to prevent, prepare, pursue, and protect. So it's not the. But it's not a wider issue on prevention programmes that are outside of the remit of that group of children and young people. You'd be asking them to do a much wider piece that isn't relevant to that group of people.
And I suggest that it's possibly something that you can refer to in the task and finish when we look at the different aspects of the task and finish.
Yeah.
So it's an important point that you raised, but it's not part of the prevent programme as such. Is everybody happy for us to agree the work programme as it stands at the moment? We need to meet as a committee on the work programme, and I believe that is being put in place. But yes, everybody happy to agree? Right, thank you very much. So that just brings us to the close of the meeting. The date of the next meeting is on Tuesday, the 11th of November at 2 p.m. I'd like to thank you all for attending. Can I ask that unless you have formal business, please can attendees other than council members and officers exit the Plough Lane site? Now formally close the meeting. Please ensure that you've taken all your personal possessions with you. And that if you've got hard copies of the exempt agenda item, please can you hand that into the clerk? And before I close the meeting, can I check that the live stream has been